Hi everybody, my name is Zach. I'm studying here at the Dzogchen Retreat Center USA with Khenpo Choga Rinpoche, and Rinpoche has asked for me to put together a list of 5 reasons why bodhicitta is both a necessary and sufficient condition for becoming Buddha. So I'd like to sort of preface this talk by saying this is not going to be a beginner's talk. I'm going to be referencing things like absolute bodhicitta and emptiness, and I really don't have the time to explain them properly here. So if these things are totally new concepts for you, I encourage you to do some more research on those. You may not want to proceed watching further until you do. For the purposes of this talk, I'm going to be talking about Buddha, or in English, vast awakening, as the state that's utterly devoid of negative thinking. Or on the other side, you could say it's the perfection of all positive types of thinking. And for bodhicitta, I'm going to be defining that simply as the intention to establish all beings in that state of Buddha. So let's just get right into the 5 reasons here. The first reason why bodhicitta is both a necessary and sufficient condition for becoming Buddha is that Buddhahood is a means and not an end. So let me say that again. Buddha is a means and not an end. The idea here is that one attains the state of Buddhahood not as the end result of a practice that's geared towards attaining personal happiness, but really only with the motivation to help all beings. The more we increase our own positive thinking, the more that benefits other beings. It stands that when we've perfected our positive thinking, we can help beings the most. So it's only through desiring to help other beings that one becomes Buddha. In that sense, it's a necessary condition for becoming Buddha. As far as sufficiency is concerned, intention brings result. What your intention is what the result will be. So if your overriding focus, if your sole intention is to establish all beings in perfect Buddhahood, becoming Buddha yourself is something that will naturally happen along the way. Now, that doesn't mean you can say, I want all beings to become Buddha, and that suffices for your overriding intention. It's got to be your driving, motivating factor. So that's the first reason that Buddha is a means and not an end. The second reason why bodhicitta is necessary and sufficient for becoming Buddha is that bodhicitta is comprised of compassion and wisdom. Now, to lack bodhicitta is to lack compassion and wisdom. And as I said before, Buddhahood is the perfection of all types of positive thinking. And therefore, you cannot become Buddha while lacking any types of positive thinking, compassion and wisdom being 2 very important ones. So in that sense, it's necessary. With regard to sufficiency, to have bodhicitta is to have compassion and wisdom. To have compassion and wisdom, in turn, is to have all other forms of positive thinking. So renunciation, faith, love, those are all contained within compassion and wisdom. If you've got compassion and wisdom, those things naturally are present. Therefore, as your bodhicitta increases, all of your positive thinking increases, and the natural result of that, the end result, is to become Buddha. In that way, it's sufficient. The third reason that bodhicitta is both necessary and sufficient to become Buddha, and this is, I'm going to be getting into absolute bodhicitta here, is that absolute bodhicitta means directly cognizing the nature of one's mind. Now, I said before, we define Buddha as a state that's totally free from negative thinking and sort of the perfection of positive types of thinking. Another way of defining Buddhahood is to say it's the full realization of the nature of one's mind. Now, the lowest level of real absolute bodhicitta is the sort of first direct cognition of the nature of one's mind. There are many levels of this. The more your absolute bodhicitta increases, the fuller the realization of your mind becomes. When that realization is perfect, in that case you've become Buddha. Now, with regard to absolute bodhicitta being necessary for becoming Buddha, the idea here is that if you don't recognize the nature of your mind even a little bit, it's obviously impossible for you to have the full recognition of the nature of your mind. So in that case, it's necessary for you to have absolute bodhicitta. With regard to sufficiency, the moment that you directly realize the nature of your mind for the first time, even though it's not a complete realization yet, this represents a sort of sea change in your being and your thinking. It radically, fundamentally changes the way that you think and act, and basically everything. Atisha has said, if the real meaning of emptiness is understood, and here emptiness can be equated with absolute bodhicitta, realizing the nature of your mind. So if the real meaning of emptiness is understood, one's body, speech, and mind will become subdued, like cotton wool pressed under one's heel, or like a lamp of butter tossed into a broth of barley meal. The idea here is that once you have this realization, your positive thinking will sort of naturally increase. And in this way, absolute bodhicitta is sufficient for becoming Buddha. Now, to continue on with absolute bodhicitta, I'll discuss this in a little bit more detail. We come to my fourth reason why bodhicitta is necessary and sufficient for becoming Buddha. And that's that absolute bodhicitta is emptiness with compassion at its core. Now, I don't have time to really get into a discussion of emptiness that would be, that would suffice to give you a good understanding of what it is. But let me say a few things about what emptiness is not. Emptiness is not nothingness. Emptiness is not a thing, nor is emptiness a being. Emptiness is a state beyond existence, beyond not existence, and indeed beyond all extremes. More than this really is the topic of another discussion, so I encourage you to check out some of the other videos here. But there are two things that I really want to emphasize here about emptiness for now. And that's that the realization of emptiness is not different than the realization of the nature of one's own mind, which is not different from absolute bodhicitta. And second, this emptiness, this absolute bodhicitta, this is inseparable from compassion. You cannot separate compassion and emptiness. It's impossible. So when you realize emptiness, compassion naturally and without fail increases. So with regard to the necessity of this emptiness with compassion at its core, this absolute bodhicitta, the Doha of Saraha says as follows: one who meditates on emptiness severed from compassion will not find the supreme path. So this is a good mile marker for you. If you think that you've realized emptiness along your path and you notice, wait a minute, my compassion hasn't increased, then I've got bad news for you. You haven't really realized emptiness yet. So that's kind of a good mile marker there. Now, with regard to sufficiency, the great Atisha has said that the ultimate end of all dharmas is emptiness with compassion at its core. If the meaning of the ultimate emptiness is understood, it will work as an antidote to all misery. So again, this absolute bodhicitta really, it's the distillation of all of the Buddha's teachings, and in that case is sufficient for becoming Buddha. Now, to get into a little bit more detail about this, we'll get to my fifth reason here, which is that absolute bodhicitta includes all six of the transcendent perfections, or the six paramitas. When you realize emptiness, you no longer crave external things, and therefore you practice transcendent generosity naturally. Without craving or attachment, there's nothing that impedes discipline, and so that kind of goes on increasing without effort. When you no longer cling to an I, there's no reason for anger to arouse, and so therefore you practice patience unceasingly. Emptiness is immeasurable joy and bliss, and so diligence continues unabated. And the mind that does not attach to things as substantial, does not attach to phenomena as inherently existing, practices transcendent meditation with ease. And finally, since emptiness is beyond the three spheres or the three concepts, subject, object, and action, when you realize emptiness, you naturally practice transcendent wisdom as well. Now, a little bit more specifically with regard to why it's necessary to have absolute bodhicitta in order to really do this. If you don't perfect the six paramitas, there's no way to become Buddha. Again, I said Buddha is not lacking any positive qualities. Furthermore, you can't truly practice the six paramitas unless you have absolute bodhicitta. If you have clinging to the three spheres, for example, the six transcendent perfections are no longer transcendent. So in order to really practice them, you need to have that absolute bodhicitta. And finally, with regard to sufficiency, the six paramitas generate the two accumulations, merit and wisdom. And the complete perfection of these two is the attainment of Buddhahood. And like I said above, when you realize emptiness, you naturally practice the six paramitas. So in that way, it's sufficient for becoming Buddha. Thank you very much.